Boker Tov, Haverim. Good morning, my friends and companions in study. We continue once again with another soulful psalm. This week, we're going to be focusing on Psalm 52. It's not a long psalm, it has some interesting things to observe. Um, and one of its features is what we think of our enemies, or how we get frustrated with certain people and we create narratives in our head against them. Now, when I thought I was going to maybe put a clip in front of this, I wanted to use David's speech to Goliath just before he smites him, smacks him with a smooth, round river rock. Now, what's odd about that speech is that it's so impractical. It is a beautiful speech about David's faith in God and how that faith will allow him to triumph over Goliath. But it's an odd, long speech to give at the beginning of a fight, right? And in fact, I looked for a couple of clips. There are lots of clips, sort of reimagining David's confrontation with Goliath, but in none of them do they include his complete speech for obvious reasons. You just don't, you know, launch into a protracted theological statement before you go into battle. It's not cinematic, it's not logical, it doesn't make sense. So I don't have the clip I was hoping to show you, but in fact, what's going on in this psalm is very much like David's speech to Goliath. It has the unusual feature that it seems to be speaking in direct discourse to the psalmist's opponent or enemy or the person he perceives to be making his life miserable. And then we then conclude with themes of God's going to be with me, even if you are against me. And if God is with me, what do I have to fear? So I never got the clip I wanted. But in any case, I'm going to call attention to one other oddity about this psalm, and then we're going to dive into it a little bit. So the oddity consists of the superscription, and we talk about superscriptions from time. First verse is not part of the poem; it's a declaration about the origins of the poem. And in this particular case, it says, "For the leader," in other words, these are instructions for the musical leader when this was originally performed, a maskil of David. Maskil is a term we don't know its true musical valuation, but it's something like, oh, give me a blues progression in the Mississippi style or whatever. We don't know. And then it explains what the editor psalmist, the person assembling this collection, thinks is the original context of this poem. When Doeg, the Edomite, came and informed Saul, telling him David came to Ahimelech's house. What? Well, so Doeg is a servant of Saul, and he does some pretty reprehensible things during the period when Saul is pursuing David as a threat to his throne. And so, here, as an informant or an enemy, uh, he tells Saul that David has been in communication with a Philistine king, and ergo, David is a traitor. All right. So, the editor decided that this psalm was composed on the occasion of that event. There is absolutely no evidence for that, aside from the fact that the enemy is being described as a warrior. It makes no sense for this simple reason, and that is that towards the end of the poem, uh, the psalmist writes, "But I am like a thriving olive tree in God's house." Anybody who's paying attention to the stories of First and Second Samuel, First Kings knows historically, that makes no sense because God's house did not exist in David's lifetime. There was the portable sanctuary, but no one's planting trees there. There would have been trees on the permanent sanctuary. And that permanent sanctuary was not built by David. It didn't exist in David's lifetime. It was built by his son, Solomon. So the image of an olive tree growing in front of God's house, pure anachronism. This poem was composed under different circumstances by someone who was not David. It's pretty obvious to a reader who has any sense of biblical history, but that was the association that the editor made. It seems to be an almost compulsive need to connect each of these psalms to the life of David, whether it makes total sense or not. So that aside, it's a very interesting poem because it addresses the psalmist's opponent directly. There's direct discourse, or at least a rhetorical speech towards his enemy, which is something we all do. Aren't you frustrated by someone at work and you work out all these speeches in your head to tell them off and let them know that they're completely unhinged, or they're wrong, or they're going to get their comeuppance or something like that? And of course, we always compose the perfect speech in our head that we will never get to deliver in real time in real life. But that's what's going on here, and that's interesting in itself. It is still very artful, and I'll show you the primary reason for that. And then it concludes with words that whatever my opponents are, whoever they are, however powerful they are, God is more powerful than they are. And I rest assured. So at a time when one is troubled, at a time when one feels besieged by different threats, whether they be human or systemic, this is a nice poem. So let's get into it and let's take a look at it just for a few minutes. It's not a long poem. It begins with a rhetorical question addressed to the opposition. Why do you boast of your evil, brave fellow? Now, the word used here actually is gibor, which means a hero or a warrior. And that is repeated several times through here, this theme of how strong the enemy is, sort of like Goliath, right? He's not only powerful, he also has wealth and position and security. But over and over again in the psalm, and unfortunately you can't completely see it because disappears in the translation, is there is a constant reference to how powerful this opponent is. Just to give you an example, there is the verb yaoz. You will, in your strength, or being strong, is based on the word maoz, which means a fortress. And so the sense of this poem is, you may think you are invulnerable, but even in your great strength, you will fail because God is with me. So let me share with you most of this poem, and then we can make a few last thoughts. So that was verse 3. Why do you boast of your evil, brave fellow? God's faithfulness never ceased. So that's a antonym. It gives you the opposite uh, position from where the opponent stands. Your tongue devises mischief like a sharpened razor that works treacherously. Parallelism. You prefer evil to good. Now that's pretty harsh. Nobody thinks that they're doing evil, and people think that they're justified in what they do, but clearly he perceives evil. The lie to speaking truth, and that's an odd parallelism. It's good to evil, lie to truth. All right. You love all pernicious words, treacherous speech, another parallelism. So God will tear you down for good, will break you and pluck you from your tent and root you out of the land of the living. Selah. Ooh, wow. That's God will be my vindicator. God will be my avenger. The righteous seeing it will be awestruck. It will be a great fall. They will mock at him, saying, "Where was a fellow who did not make God his refuge?" And here we get the fortress strong theme again, but trusted in his great wealth, relied upon his mischief. But I am a thriving olive tree in God's house. Now, understand that the image of the tree, of course, is an incredibly important image in Jewish tradition. It's the symbol of the connection between heaven and earth. It's the symbol of life. The tree of life plays such an important part in our thinking, but also it is a message of tranquility. Trees really don't defend themselves, but they thrive, and especially if they're in the house of God, then they are sheltered. And you can be especially confident that that tree will not fall victim to any mischief. I trust in the faithfulness of God forever and ever. Now, here is, I got to say, a phrase that we use all the time: Leolam Vaed, forever and ever, or forever beyond. But actually, I think the best translation for this is, in fact, what Buzz Lightyear said: to infinity and beyond. That's really the most literal translation of Leolam Bayed, to infinity and beyond. I praise you forever, for you have acted. I declare that your name is good in the presence of your faithful ones. So, what's happened here in the last third of the psalm is he stopped talking to his opponent and he's now addressing God. And he expresses his confidence in God, but his trust in God, so that whatever machinations he may face from his fellow human beings, he knows that he rests calmly and securely in this house of God, in the hands of God. So that's the psalm. It's a very simple psalm, but it has, especially in Hebrew, some very lovely, playful rhetoric around the theme of strength. And I'm just going to leave it at that. So that's our psalm for this week. I will share with you something next week. Thank you for taking the time. That was Psalm 52.